When a 2-year-old girl spots a sick pit bull at the shelter, she makes up her mind to adopt it. Little does she know, the poor dog has been turned down by everyone because of its appearance. But when her mother hints at finding another pet, the little girl surprises everyone with her actions. Sarah always thought her daughter was loving and kind, but when she saw her stop in front of the saddest, smelliest dog in the shelter, she began to wonder if her daughter was a bit strange. She had promised her daughter, G, that she could pick any pet she wanted. So Sarah couldn't understand why G was choosing this dog over all the cute ones in the shelter. Next to it was a cute German Shepherd puppy with lovely eyes, but she only had eyes for the sick pit bull. Sarah had 2 reasons for not liking the dog G chose. First, it was a pit bull. Sarah knew pit bulls are big, strong, and protective. She worried about her daughter's safety around such a dog. What if it accidentally hurt her while they played? Second, the dog was clearly sick. It smelled bad, had runny eyes and nose, and was missing fur. It wasn't the cute dog Sarah had hoped for when they left home. Sarah sighed. Her daughter had been begging her for a dog for as long as she could remember. Her literal first word had been doggy. She had fallen in love with the animals by watching her neighbor's golden retriever sunbathe on its porch, and had immediately decided she needed a doggy of her own. For a few months, Sarah had simply told her she was too young to take care of a pet. But now that G was 2 and was finally capable of doing everything by herself, she didn't have any more excuses. And if she had to be honest, she too liked the idea of a soft pad inside the house. Not only would a dog be a perfect companion and protector for her daughter, but it would also bring warmth and fun into their house and provide them with an excuse to be out and about more often. But she didn't like that dog. What's wrong with it? She asked the shelter staff, doing her best to conceal a disgusted expression. They explained that the poor pit bull had a bad case of mange and that she was also battling another respiratory infection. They were giving her medicines, but she simply lacked the strength to fight. Unfortunately, her life hadn't been very happy up until that point. Apparently, the pit bull had been born to 2 A-listers in the world of dog breeding. Her owner had been expecting another star to sell at a high price, but had instead found himself with a sickly dog whose snout was just too wide and coat was just too brittle. The poor dog couldn't find anyone to buy her, so she was kicked out once her mom stopped feeding her. A kind person rescued her, but he passed away a few months later. His family didn't want the dog, so they gave her to a shelter. She was adopted quickly, but the owners returned her because she cried a lot and seemed sad. The shelter staff tried to explain that she was grieving the loss of her first owner. The family who adopted her next was angry. They wanted a happy dog, not one that seemed sad all the time. But being rejected didn't make the dog feel any better. She was scared of her kennel and other dogs barking. She didn't like socializing and kept getting sick. The shelter vet later found out she had a long-term illness and needed surgery to get better. But the shelter didn't have enough money for the operation, and no one wanted to adopt a dog with health problems. So the poor dog was rejected again and again. By the time she was 1 year old, she hadn't experienced much beyond the sad walls of her shelter cage. She didn't seem likely to get better soon, and the shelter staff worried she might never leave her cage. They were afraid she might be put to sleep if she got sick again. But then G and her mom came in, and G immediately stopped at the dog's cage. "Doggy's sick, need help?" she said, pulling on her mom's dress. Sarah was surprised. How did her daughter know the dog was sick? G must have seen the dog's runny nose and guessed she had a cold. Sarah felt warm inside seeing her daughter's kindness. "Can you take her out so she can play with my daughter?" she asked the shelter staff. A staff member unlatched the dog's cage and tried to coax the pit bull out of it. However, the poor thing started shaking uncontrollably at the sight of the human approaching her. Terrified whimpers broke Sarah's heart. Another staff member came to them with a leash but almost retreated when she noticed the dog's reaction to her colleague. However, she had not anticipated what little G was about to do. The girl kneeled down, not caring that she was brushing her pretty dress on the floor of the shelter. She tentatively reached out with her hand, making sure to leave it a few inches away from the dog's face. It was clear that she didn't want to frighten the pit bull. Audrey's breath caught as she saw the dog's snout inch closer to her daughter's hand. The pit bull looked pretty weak and harmless, but it was still a dog and could easily snap and bite. She was about to pull G away from the cage when the dog's little tongue brushed against her fingers. She let out a squeal of delight. She extended her fingers towards the dog and let her sniff her, chuckling softly as she licked her hand. Surprisingly, the pit bull nuzzled her big head against the little girl's hand, letting G pet her. The shelter staff was amazed. They had been trying so hard to socialize the dog, and the results had been underwhelming to say the least. And yet, this little girl had only spent a few seconds with the pit bull, and she was already petting her. The staff member with the leash decided it was worth a try and gently approached to clamp it onto the dog's collar. The pit bull trembled as she approached, but then relaxed when she backed away, leaving her alone with G. The little girl grabbed the leash and gently tugged on it, coaxing the dog out. Shockingly, the pit bull didn't need to be told twice. She slowly got out of her cage, nervously looking around but seemed emboldened by G's presence by her side. The two of them walked around together, with G stopping more than once to clean the dog's runny nose and caked eyes with her own dress. Her mother didn't even find the strength to wrinkle her nose. The sight was too cute to worry about a dirty piece of fabric. G good, G said happily as she played with the dog. Sarah watched her daughter and realized she wanted to adopt the sad, smelly dog. She went to the counter, smiling at the surprised shelter staff. They couldn't believe the sick pit bull was finally getting adopted. Sarah asked about the dog's surgery cost and what to feed her. She already talked about the dog like it was hers. But there was a problem. Shelters don't just give pets to anyone. They need to make sure the pet will be safe and loved. Sarah understood this. She made an appointment for a home visit the next day. But G didn't want to leave her new friend. When the staff put the dog back in the cage, she started crying and shaking. "Doggy's sick, Mama," she cried. "Need help. Go home." Sarah tried to explain that they would take the dog home with them. The next day, after the shelter staff made sure they were a good fit for the dog, Sarah told G, but G didn't want to listen. She cried and pointed at the pit bull. The dog whimpered too. Sarah felt sorry and was about to take G away when she saw something in the staff's eyes. They saw how much G cared for the dog, so they agreed to let them take her home. One staff member even offered to visit their house to make sure it was good for the dog. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief as she told G that they were bringing the dog home with them. Another staff member rushed to get the pit bull out of her cage again. Unsurprisingly, the little girl dashed towards the dog, enveloping her in a sweet embrace. The pit bull let herself be hugged and immediately stopped shaking. It was like G was her own personal weighted blanket, and she only felt safe in her embrace. At Sarah's house, a person from the shelter looked around every room to make sure it was good for the dog. They said Sarah's house was just right for the dog because it was safe for babies, with no sharp corners or big stairs that could hurt the delicate pit bull. Before leaving, Sarah asked for the vet's number so she could call and make an appointment for the dog's surgery. She didn't want the dog to be in pain, and she also wanted to stop it from sneezing on the floors. Sarah called the vet that same night, and they agreed the dog would have surgery in 3 days. Meanwhile, she was really good at taking care of the dog. She washed the pit bull herself to get rid of the bad smell and made sure it ate the right amount of food. But she also secretly gave the dog extra snacks when her mom wasn't looking. She named the dog Scarlet and promised to always be there for her. When the day of the operation came, Scarlet already looked much better. She needed time to heal completely and fight off infections, but this time she seemed ready to get better. She had a real owner now, and G was her reason to be happy and healthy. 6 months later, Scarlet looked completely different. She no longer smelled bad or had runny eyes. Her fur was thick, her eyes were clear, and she loved licking G's hands. Thanks to G, she was even making friends with a neighbor's dog. Sarah was so proud of G for choosing to help the dog. They had saved Scarlet from a sad life and gained a lifelong friend. Sarah used to think pit bulls were mean dogs, but Scarlet was the sweetest dog she'd ever met. Life was great for them, all because G showed love to a dog that needed it. What do you think of G's action? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.